if from next year we have growth rates of 3 to 4%, and bear in mind these are what we had in the really good early years of the euro membership, we will need about 20 years to create the jobs that have been lost since the beginning of the crisis.
Not month, years. All right, Jung Naiv, in Athens we're still in the eye of the hurricane, as I was told. And who are you?
I'm Nick Malkoutzis. I'm the deputy editor of Kathimerini English edition, and I'm the editor of a website called Malkoutzis, which provides political and economic analysis from Greece.
So, I mean, we're in the center of Athens. We're a tourist place. I can't really see the crisis. Is there still a crisis, Nick?
There is still a crisis, but I get this comment a lot from friends and colleagues who come to Greece, Athens in particular, and look around and, on a sunny day see people sitting outside having coffee or a meal and wonder where the crisis is. And, I think there's two answers to that. Firstly, there's the fact that Greeks traditionally have shared their problems with family, friends, and this is very much part of the crisis therapy now. People who've lost their jobs or whose wages have been cut or having a difficult time financially in general will share a coffee, a meal with friends or family and discuss problems and try and also get their anxiety, their worries out of their system. And the other part of it is that really, a lot of this crisis is not something that you'll see on the street. Yeah, fine, a few years ago we saw protests, a lot of protests, rioting even in Athens, but that's not really what the crisis is about. This is a crisis that's very much in factories, in offices, in people's homes, in hospitals. It's outside of the public view. Walking around, you won't see it.
But why not? I mean, why don't journalists, the news go into hospitals, into factories? Okay, maybe not in people's homes, but
well, I think that some people do. I think it's once you start scratching beneath the surface that you see where the real impact of the crisis is, and there you see people who have real difficulty getting by, and it's not just 5% of the population. We're talking a big part of the Greek population is having severe difficulties, and some of them really have no support at all.
No support at all. Can you explain why that is?
Well, look, at the moment we have about 1.4 million Greeks unemployed. That's about 27% unemployment rate. And only 15% of those, that's 15%, will receive unemployment benefit, will receive any kind of support.
And the rest?
The rest don't get anything. No,
nothing.
Because you get unemployment benefit for the first year that you're out of work, and then it's also dependent on the amount of social security credits that you've accrued over time. So after that, you're left on your own, and that's where really the family safety net comes in, and that's why it's such an important part of this crisis, an important part of the story of this crisis, the way families have come in to help people. So for instance, almost half of Greek families now say that pensions are their main source of income, which is an incredible statistic for a Eurozone country.
Wow. Well, I mean, how can that be? Like, what was it like before the crisis, before 2008? Was it similar, or did this all turn into in the last five years?
No, look, I mean, family has always been a very important part of Greek life, but clearly what's happened during the crisis with people losing their jobs, and one of the things you have to take into account is that the Greek jobless rate has increased by over 300% since the start of the crisis. More than 1 million people have lost their jobs. Hundreds of thousands of people have had their wages cut. Tax obligations have increased probably by about 20-25%. People have lost access to healthcare and to income support. Social spending is down. So this suddenly makes it really important for some people to find somewhere that they can lean on and get some support, and that's where pensions and family has come into the equation.
Have pensions always also been cut?
Pensions have been cut
Really?
four times since the start of the crisis by Close to 30%, yes. So,
Wow.
so an average Greek pension now is around 700 euros. That's a basic pension, which still for some European countries is not bad. But it's going to be cut more in the years to come.
But I mean, if you say there are whole families living on pensions of the grandparents,
Yeah,
how in that world can they live on that?
clearly 700 euros isn't going to be enough to feed a family of four or whatever it may be. I mean, some people are having real difficulty, selling homes, selling property, selling whatever valuable things they have, cutting down to their expenses to the bare minimum, building up debts. I mean, one of the things that is often overlooked is the amount of debt that individuals and companies build up towards the state. That's over around 60 billion now in Greece. It increased by 13 billion just over the last 15 months.
Wow.
So, that's how people are getting by.
And I mean, there's always like in Germany, there's the statistic like, okay, there's the public debt around 2 trillion, and then there's the private how do you say that, like not income but like the private money, like
Right.
and it's always like triple. Like there's always 3 times more money in private households than there's public debt.
Yeah.
So is it the same way in Greece?
It's not. No, it's not the same in Greece. I mean, for instance, private debt in Greece had always been very low, even in the lead up to this crisis. Part of the narrative was, those Greeks, they overspend, they live beyond their means and stuff. No, actually, if you look at the state lived beyond its means, but in terms of private households, they didn't. The percentage of debt is very low for Eurozone standards. There is wealth in the terms of property. One thing we have different with Germany is that Greeks tend to own their homes, which isn't so common in Germany from what I understand. So in Greece, home ownership is somewhere around 90%, very, very high. So, for instance, there was an European Central Bank study a few years ago which took into account property, the wealth attributed to property, and found that Greeks were more wealthy than Germans. But obviously, one thing you have to say is firstly that happened before the crisis, and property prices have dropped by probably about 40 to 50% since then. And secondly, it's just a different way that society is set up, where here we have home ownership, and in Germany you don't. It doesn't necessarily make Greeks wealthy. And there was a huge boom in home ownership and home buying in the early years of the euro, the sort of golden age of the Greek economy, when growth rates were about 4%, and suddenly people are finding themselves, paying mortgages of 800, 900, 1,000 plus euros on homes that will never retrieve the value for which they bought them.
Wow. So I mean, at least that's at least one good thing, that people who have nothing at least have their home. They don't have to pay rent or pay it off.
Yeah, and so far, and until the beginning of this year, there has been protection against banks seizing people's homes.
But not anymore?
Well, part of those restrictions have been lifted, so homes which have a value of above 200,000 euros can now be seized by the bank. And the other thing the government is bringing in now is that if you owe debts to the state and you're not able to pay them, then you can give your home to the state and wipe off your debts, which is a controversial idea because, of course, would you rather be someone in debt or someone homeless? It's a very difficult question to answer.
Wow. So can you like maybe summarize how this whole crisis came about? Like why is there a good crisis anyway? Like what happened 4 years ago? Did it all start even?
Yeah,
Way back.
There are the various threads to the story and various narratives depending on which way you want to look at it. I would say, that the briefest way of encapsulating it is that Greece allowed its state sector to grow probably a little too much than it should and become too inefficient, which was more important than the size of it. It wasn't really as big as some people think, but it was certainly inefficient. So that was a problem. There was a lot of waste and a certain amount of corruption there.
Like what? What do you mean by state sector?
Well, there we're talking about public hospitals, about public companies, the railway, or whatever it may be.
There were too many?
Civil servants, employing civil servants. Look, I mean, over the last 2 or 3 decades, the political parties that have ruled Greece used the state sector to sort of exchange favors with voters. So support us and we'll find a job for your son or your daughter. So this was going on, yes. I mean, it's not the whole story, but it's certainly part of the story, yes. The other aspect to it was that when Greece joined the euro, it was completely unprepared for what the consequences would be. The idea was very much, we're going into a single currency with Germany, with the Netherlands, with Finland, good, strong economies. That will make us a good, strong economy as well.
And I learned that before the euro, there was the drachma, and inflation was always high, and people didn't know maybe in a year or two money is worth 20% less. And now there's a euro. At least that's
stability.
There's something stable.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the irony, of course, because it's probably the most unstable period that we've had for a long time. But the idea was that we'll be a strong economy like the others, but of course what joining the euro meant was that Greece would also have to compete with these economies. It wasn't part of a club, it was competing directly with them. And what we saw, for instance, in Germany with the Gerhard Schröder government coming in, the 2010 agenda, a lot of labour reforms, social reforms. Well, Greece and other southern European countries were going the other way because they were suddenly finding easy money. They were part of the euro. The state was able to borrow very cheaply at rates almost similar to what Germany was borrowing at, and suddenly money became very easy. And while Germany and other countries were becoming more competitive, leaner and more efficient, Greece and other southern European countries were going in a different direction, and of course that wasn't sustainable.
Can you explain for the naive how can it be that Germany cut social welfare and actually made reforms, and as you said, Greece went the other way? How could that be?
Well, I think simply because people, on a policy making level, and certainly at the level of the general public, didn't realise what being part of the euro meant. It was kind of the way I would describe it. There's a good Greek word for it, which is called hubris in English, or ivris, which means we got into the euro, we made it. That's it. We don't. It's an easy ride from here on.
That easy.
Well, yeah, because money suddenly became very cheap. I can tell you that my father's generation, they had to save up for a lifetime in order to buy a house, and that's how home ownership came about in Greece. Or people first gathered all their money they needed to buy a car and then went and bought it. When we got into the euro, suddenly, with rates dropping, money became much easier. People were able to spend, and along with the spending, prices went up, and with prices going up, suddenly wages had to go up as well, and there was less focus on how are we competitive in a eurozone economy, in a global economy, and how are we also productive. What areas of the economy do we need to focus on? And one of the big damaging aspects of the fact that money became easier is that we started importing a hell of a lot of stuff rather than producing anything. And if you look at the structural aspect of this crisis, that's one of the key areas that Greece never really reformed its economy. Forget about how many civil servants we had, what we were paying them, but its productive base. What are we doing? What are we producing? How are we bringing money in? We forgot about all that.
So you forgot about exporting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Exports fell, imports rose tremendously. So all this money we were borrowing and generating, we were spending on financing someone else's economy.
So you could say, importing or getting a lot of money is one thing. It wouldn't be that bad if you had just exported the same amount, or.
Yeah, look, if Greece had a more productive and export-oriented economy, certainly this crisis would have been less pronounced. If you look at, for instance, the example of Portugal, which is similar size country, similar situation, the problem there is much less. Why? Because they have a much better production pace. They export much more. The size of the debt, the size of the deficit are all less. And although they've had a lot of problems, unemployment and social problems, they've not been as heavy as they have in Greece.
Mm-hmm. So what happened then in 2008, 2009? Why all of a sudden did people care about Greece?
Well, because suddenly people realized that if Greece went bankrupt, if it was forced out of the Eurozone, it could bring the whole single currency down. And suddenly Greece, from being, in the far corner of Europe where no one really was bothering about what was going on, was, the front line of the Euro crisis.
I also learned a lot, even from Per Steinbrück and other leading German politicians, that Germany has had is not responsible for the Greek crisis, but also partly responsible. I mean, the other nations, other Euro nations, could have done something about it. They could have looked closely and see what's going on. Would you agree?
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, there are two things here. One is, in the build-up to the crisis, it was very obvious to everyone that something was going really wrong in Greece. And certainly once the US financial crisis hit, it was clear that there was a big problem in Greece, but somehow, the can being kicked down the road. No one really wanted to deal with the situation. And there is this kind of, to some extent, myth that's been perpetuated that suddenly in 2009, late 2009, there was a change of government in Greece and people discovered the real extent of the problem in Greece, which...
But I actually remember there was a new government, and like 2 weeks into it, they were like, okay, we have to correct some statistics.
They readjusted the deficit figures and
they readjusted it.
Yeah, I mean by a big amount. Basically, what the situation was that the previous government had been disguising the size of Greece's deficit.
How?
And suddenly, well, this is the question, because all these figures go to Eurostat, the European Commission statistical agencies, and are checked. So you wonder how this was possible. So you have to say that there's a big amount of responsibility to be shared out.
Were those politicians, politicians in power back then, were they held responsible?
No, I mean that's been one of the problems really of the Greek crisis, is that a lot of things have been swept under the carpet and people haven't really been made to face their responsibility for some things.
I mean, I remember the financial crisis in America, like with Lehman Brothers and the whole scheme on Wall Street. Nobody's going to jail for that, even now. And and in Greece and other nations, politicians are not held responsible.
No, the political system in Greece really sort of form this protective barrier and try to protect itself from this, the consequences of the responsibility it held. And I think there was also a fear that if we started holding people responsible, it might turn into a bit of a political pogrom, and that would be damaging for the country at a time when the crisis was striking. But clearly that's a very unsatisfactory outcome, that no one has really been held to account for what happened. But to go back to the issue of this idea of shared responsibility, then the second aspect of it is in dealing with the crisis, whether the Eurozone did what it had to do, it did all that it could have done, or whether it actually then contributed to the crisis getting worse rather than better.
By austerity?
Well, austerity, is part of the story. I think the thing you need to understand about the Greek bailouts were that they were designed on certain parameters. One was how much money the Eurozone and the IMF were willing to give. Not how much money was needed, but how much they were willing to give. How much time they were willing to allow for the adjustment, and what kind of measures would be needed to achieve that adjustment. And the last thing is the fiscal targets that were set, why were they set? They're basically set so Greece can be in a position to pay back what it's borrowed. So all of which in a sense are understandable, but which if you put together don't necessarily mean that you produce the best package to tackle this specific crisis. And what you had was a relatively limited amount of money demanding a sharp fiscal adjustment, the biggest that's ever been undertaken by certainly a Eurozone country, but one of the biggest we've ever seen in the world, in a very short space of time, which demanded very, very harsh austerity measures. And that, of course, then had a knock-on effect in terms of the economy, society, and so on.
So going back to the politicians responsible. I mean, I expect they're probably not in power anymore. Are those parties gone and the politicians gone?
Well, no. I mean, this is the irony, really, that the two parties that had the biggest hand in creating the situation, which is New Democracy on the centre right and PASOK in the centre left, now form Greece's coalition government. Yeah, of course. Their argument is that we realise the problem. We're standing up to our responsibilities. We're fixing the situation, but it's one of the ironies of the Greek crisis, certainly.
I mean, on the other hand, maybe there are the opposition parties. Are they too weak or too radical?
Yeah, that's the flip side to the argument. Really, is that one? It's a commentary on that side of Greek politics, the fact that New Democracy and PASOK are still holding power, but it's also perhaps an indictment of what the opposition parties are offering, in that in such a difficult and situation where there's so many unpopular policies, where so many people are suffering, no opposition party has really been able to capitalize and put together a convincing alternative. At the moment, Syriza is the main opposition party. It looks like it might win the European Parliament elections on May the 25th, but probably not by a very big margin. And you would think that in normal circumstances, an opposition party that's offering a convincing alternative would be able to run away, get 40+%, but that won't be the case. So you have to look at that side of it as well.
So what is Syriza doing maybe wrong? Are they doing something wrong? Are their ideas radical? Can you tell us a little about their ideas for solving?
Syriza has always challenged the idea of austerity from the start of the crisis, and has argued that Greece needs a big debt write-off. Just scrap a big part of Greece's debt to give it a chance to breathe.
Schuldenschnitt?
Something like that, yes.
Like that?
Yes. I think now there are probably a lot of people who would agree with that point of view, even people who at the beginning of the crisis didn't. Right. So we're fine until there, but the problem is beyond that. How do we get over the structural problems Greece has? And there, Syriza, it seems, at least to the public, is less convincing in terms of the way it views the public sector, in terms of the way it views the private sector. There are a lot of questions about what it really wants to achieve, and there are a lot of fears that it will simply come in and build up the public sector like the previous governments
get
did.
Their voters into
and use the public sector as a vehicle to drive the economy, and to some extent Greece has tried that and it's failed. And now the question is, how do we create a productive economy with sectors that provide a competitive advantage, with an economy that gives added value? Where are the new startups going to come from? Where are the innovation? Where's the innovation going to come from? We have tremendously educated and talented people, really good human resources. How can we put those to use? And there, I think people haven't been to a large extent convinced by Syriza's answers.
Are there other parties that are valuable or to look into?
Greece, is going through a very interesting transitional phase in its politics. So since the last general elections of June 2012, we've had more than 15 new political parties created.
15.
Yeah, 15. And in the in the European elections, a total of 46 parties will be running. Okay, a lot of those are people that will, just go and vote for themselves, and it's a bit of a joke. But there are probably sort of 8 to 10 parties that have some kind of say in Greek politics, and I think we're still at the stage where it's evolving, and we don't know what it's evolving into, and there is no one party or two parties that are coming out and say, okay, you can see the future of Greece is in their hands. I think we're still in this, very much stuck in this transitional phase.
I also heard, there's a lot of poverty and people have less and less money, but I also learned there are some rich people in Greece, and rich families, a lot of rich families. Have they contributed to the crisis? Have they helped out the country? Did they say, okay, the country is suffering, we're going to put in our money, here's half of our wealth?
No, you really haven't seen that happening, and I guess that's one of the criticisms coming from outside, is that, whether it's in Germany or elsewhere in the Eurozone, you're asking us to help you Greeks, but you're not helping yourselves, and to some extent they are right. I mean, one of the problems we've had in Greece is tax evasion at the high level. Okay, a lot of petty tax evasion, but the real problem has been at the higher level, and we haven't seen enough done there. There's been some advances, but we're still a long way from having a really robust tax administration that would mean people couldn't get away with the kinds of things that they have been getting away with. And we haven't seen Greece is really super rich somehow saying, okay, we realize it's in the best interest, in our best interest and the best interest of the country to really sort of contribute in a big way towards this, and that's a valid criticism on the, especially at the time when the general population, the middle class, the working class, have been asked to really dig deep into their pockets. Their tax bill has gone up by 20, 25, 30% in the last few years, and whoever can is coming forward and is paying. So there is an imbalance there in the system, certainly.
Are the rich Greeks also involved in politics? I heard there are, we talked to Lovados yesterday, and I learned almost all politicians, even especially in those government, are usually rich folks as well.
Well, look, I mean, there's always been a case of some wealthy people going into politics. I think one of the things is that sometimes people who go into politics become rich, and that's where the questions are raised. Apart from the fact that MPs, although their salaries have been reduced, still have very healthy salaries for Greek standards. I
also learned Tsipras is pretty rich.
I don't know. I mean, look, all the politicians are forced to submit these declaration of wealth statements each year, and you see that
to the public.
Yeah, they're made public. Although there's certain questions about whether they are really that comprehensive or not, and you see that generally, yes, politicians, they get by at least.
So you can tell how much your prime minister.
Yes. You see what assets he has, how much he has in bank deposits and stuff, and at least that's whatever is recorded. Yeah, but there's been a big discussion about this, about who goes into politics, what type of people they are, whether they go in to basically make themselves rich, and you see now gradually that there is a effort from people who have not necessarily had a political background to now get into politics, to, I wouldn't necessarily say, clean it up, have a catharsis, but just to offer something different. And
like Potami?
Like Potami, for instance, it's a party formed by a journalist with Stavros Theodorakis, with no sort of major political background, and with candidates who have come from, who working people who are not politicians. it's interesting. We'll see where it goes. It's also come under a lot of criticism because it's not politically aligned, and the argument is that the nature of Greece's problems, the fact that its social services are collapsing, the fact that it has such high unemployment and so on, demand political answers, demand answers that are born out of an ideology. And he's openly saying, I'm just going to pick stuff from the left and the right. I don't have a specific ideology. And we'll see ultimately if that's enough or not. There is some skepticism about it.
We talked to him and Kostas Agiros, and they were like, no, especially because everybody has their ideology, we don't want to have one. We want to find solutions, not...
Yeah, there are a lot of people in Greece who think that's the way to go, and you see that he's doing very well in the opinion polls now in the run-up to the European Parliament elections, getting 8, 9, 10%, which is impressive for a party that's just formed a few weeks ago, doesn't really have any concrete policies. I think it's a reflection of the fact that within Greece there is a sizable part of the population that is more or less rejecting everything that is being offered and wants something new, wants something that's clean, wants something that is providing new ideas, wants people who are coming not from a party background, who haven't been nominated as MP or MEP because they joined the party youth organisation at 16, they joined some committee at 22, and they haven't done any jobs in their life. They want something different. There is a part of the Greek population that wants that, and I think that's one of the effects of the crisis. Whether Potami is the answer or not, we'll see.
And, one more thing about the rich. I mean, historically, like the very rich, don't they realize that, like, at one point the population will come to them with spears and all that? Because I mean, at some point they will go to those who have everything and take it from them. So
well, yeah, look, this is one of the weaknesses of Greece, and I think that's why they kind of sleep easy at night, is that we have a very weak to sort of non-existent civil society that would demand this kind of fairness. So while we have had thousands of protests since the beginning of the crisis, we haven't had a concerted effort to say, we want you to clamp down on tax evasion, a really big campaign to say, look, if you don't go after the rich or those who don't pay tax so they pay their fair share, we won't vote for you at the next elections, we will bring down this government. That hasn't happened, and I think that's where the rich, like, if they place their betting on that, that's why they're comfortable. I think as the media probably has to take part of the responsibility in the sense that it hasn't been alert to this kind of thing. It hasn't played its role as part of a civil society to really target this kind of thing in this constant flow of developments and stories and breaking news and all kinds of things that are happening. A lot of this stuff gets swept aside, and it's a real shame, and it's not contributing anything positive to the country.
Maybe media is owned by some rich people?
Well, that's part of the story. That there's in Greece, like many other countries, there has been this sort of nexus between big business and the media. It's not something that's particular to Greece, but in a time of crisis, that's when it shows what a problem it is, when you need a really sort of objective and inquisitive media that can sort of play a leading role. That, to a large extent, hasn't happened in Greece.
Does media always also play a role in... I mean, we all see a lot of blaming on Germany or the German government. They compare Merkel and Schäuble with Nazis and all that. Is the German government an easy scapegoat?
Look, yes. I mean, there's a section of the populist media that likes to simplify things and to paint it, into heroes and villains. Of course, the reality is much more different, and fortunately, that is a sizable but minority part of the media, and certainly it's not the type of thing that you would see in the sort of more mainstream media. I think there is a discussion to be had there about how Germany has responded to the Greek problem, and what mistakes or not have been made. But certainly the answer is not to start stigmatizing a whole population, because of course we had the reverse, with Bild Zeitung and so on about the Greeks, and not only in Germany, in other countries. And I can tell you that's had a very damaging impact on the perception of Greece and the perception of Greeks abroad. So I don't like to see it the reverse of it either.
I mean, of course, the German government made some mistakes when it comes to Greece. What, when looking into the future, what could they do right? Like, what like in the next 12 months, next 2 years, what would you say should maybe the German government demand, or be the leader of?
Well, I was in Berlin a few weeks ago and spoke to a number of people, and I found that the general perception there is very similar to elsewhere in Europe, and very similar to what is in Greece, which is that Greece needs a significant debt reduction. Its debt isn't really sustainable, it's public debt. It needs large-scale investment to get the economy going and start creating jobs, and it still needs to continue with certain structural reforms. And the answer that I got in Germany, even though all those things are accepted, was that, well, yes, we realize we need to do those things, but A, we don't trust your politicians, and B, we don't really believe your public administration is capable at this stage of handling this. Which are fair comments, and my response to that would be that the political system is in a period of transition, and you're never going to find the perfect combination, someone you can trust completely or not. So you can't really judge on that. The second, the public administration. For Greece, it's a huge task to overhaul this public administration, to make its tax collection efficient, to ensure that civil servants are doing the job they should be doing, and so on. This is going to take a number of years. The process has begun. It's very slow, but it's going to take a long time. You can't wait that long to help the Greek economy.
So get a Marshall Plan or something?
Well, look, I think the Marshall Plan was an idea that was mentioned, I think, as early as 2011, and then never, of course, materialized. So I don't know that it will now. I think you certainly need to look at ways of investing on a big scale in the Greek economy. There is now a cooperation between Germany and Greece to set up an investment fund, but it's going to, at least initially, I think it's going to be about 400 million euros. I think Germany is contributing through the development bank KfW about 100 or 200 million euros. I don't remember the exact amount. It's something, but it's very small. To give you an idea of the size of the problem that we have in Greece, if from this year we might have a small growth rate, the first since 2008. If from next year we have growth rates of 3 to 4%, and bear in mind these are what we had in the really good early years of the Euro membership, we will need about 20 years to create the jobs that have been lost since the beginning of the crisis.
Not months, years.
20 years. To return to an unemployment rate of about 8-9%. So then you have to factor in what kind of effect will that have on society, to have unemployment rates, not of 26, 27, 28%, but 20, 18, 16 for that length of time. It's something we haven't experienced in Europe before, and it's a big risk to take. And, if your argument is that we don't really trust your political system, well, the longer you leave a situation like that to fester, the more likely you are to end up with a political system that you really can't work with. We've seen the rise of Golden Dawn in the neo-Nazi party, Golden Dawn in the last few years, and I'm not necessarily saying they'll get into government, but you see what kind of things this situation breeds. And that's why I think you need to address it now.
And one last thing concerning statistics you don't see on the streets, and you were talking about the unemployed. There are actually more unemployed than employed people in Greece.
Yeah,
is that right?
If you unemployed and retired people, they are about over 1 million more than the people that are in work. So then you say, okay, that's not sustainable either. It's not, but your pension system, your social security system is going to collapse. Where's the money going to come from? So that's why the thing that Greece is crying out for now is investment into the economy, so you can start creating jobs. It needs a lot of work from the Greek side as well. Where is this money going to go? What kind of things do we want to develop? And the second is debt relief. So as you go along in the years to come, this burden, these big repayments in the future, not hanging over you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Very interesting.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.